Snail post. Tonight we will visit a quiet postal network that wakes when the gardens cool. Little carriers with shelled satchels move through moss and leaf, delivering notes and tokens with steady care. At the foot of a cracked stone step sits the central basket, a shallow wicker tray the size of a dinner plate. It rests beneath a fern whose fronds act like an awning. The basket is lined with damp leaves, each leaf a bundle of letters, rolled and tied with the threads of spider silk. Beside it, a slate shows the night's roots scratched in chalk, dots and arrows. A smooth pebble serves as the stamp press, its face inked with berry juice. 3 snails gather at the rim, their feelers raised, as if listening for the air to settle. Their shells shine with a thin gloss of dew, and each bears a tiny loop of woven grass like a strap. A small bell seed hangs on a string. One of them taps it with the point of a horn, and the shift begins. The letters are thin and soft to the touch. Most are written on birch bark peeled fine, or on the inner skin of onions dried flat under tiles. Many carry pressed leaves in place of stamps. The postmark is a circle of purple made by pressing a sliced blackberry onto a coin of wood, then onto the letter's corner. Addresses are drawn as tiny maps rather than words. A line for the path, a cross for a gate, a dot for the pond with its ring of reeds. Some envelopes hold whispers of herbs, so the recipients can recognize the sender by scent. Rosemary for a neighbor, fennel for a cousin far down the hedgerow. When the bundles are set in order, a toad hops once to the edge of the basket and watches without comment. His throat moves in a slow balloon, like a clock that does not tick but still keeps time. A platform of bark forms the sorting table. Here, a broad-shelled matron named Piker slides a letter from its tie, checks the map, and nudges it left or right with the edge of her shell. She keeps a sprig of mint tucked under her strap, and the mint brushes the paper as she reaches. Bundles bound for the north path go into a cup made from an acorn cap, while the south path mail rests in the fold of an old glove finger. Pica's pace is unhurried and exact. She does not rush the letters. She gives each one a small pause, as if letting it remember where it wants to go. A beetle climbs onto the table with a creak of armour, pulling a thimble sled with twine. The beetle waits until Pica pats the sled's rim, then lets the load settle with a soft, dry whisper. On a ledge, a glowworm illuminates the addresses like a patient lamp. The north path dips past a broken pot and into a runnel paved with pebbles. The pebbles are slick from evening mist, and they ring faintly when shells brush them. The carriers travel in single file, each one touching the next with a light tap to say, "I am here." At shallow puddles, they pass over without breaking the mirrored sky in the water. They step by laying their bodies down and lifting them again like slow stitching. Under the pot's rim, a millipede lifts and lowers its many feet like an audience applauding in soft gloves. Near the garden hose, a moth rests on the metal like a folded piece of felt. The map shows a bend at the compost heap, and here the smell changes to warm soil and orange peel. The letters rustle in their ties. They do not complain about the damp, because the damp is part of the road. There is a wayside office under the old thyme bush. A cork wedged in the dirt serves as a desk, and a pencil stub lies across a coaster. A young clerk named Dado sits there, shell small and speckled like a button. Dado keeps a journal with page edges scalloped by a careful nib made from a thorn. He records each passing bundle with a mark shaped like a tiny trail. One curl for the pot root, 2 curls for the reed root. In a jar cap, he stores return threads sorted by colour, so senders can reclaim them. If a letter looks confused, its map smudged by a careless drop, Dado cleans the corner with a breath and redraws the dot for the gate from memory. He knows the shape of everyone's gate, as others know faces. When a breeze carries the smell of rain, he covers the desk with a lettuce leaf pulled from a clip. At the pond, the snail post meets its quiet allies. Frogs provide ferry service on nights when ground routes are flooded, and they do it with dignity. A flat lily pad becomes a barge, and a frog's steady legs move it to a reed marked with a notch. A damselfly hovers above as lookout, its blue body a small lantern. The letters lie on a leaf tray, and a snail rides with them, anchored by a thread looped around a reed stem. The water makes soft slaps against the pad's underside, and the pad moves like a breath. On the far shore, a sandbar is pitted with small round prints from a raccoon who came earlier and left without incident. A station stone sits there, warmed by the day, dry now, ready to receive a postmark and a brief rest. A frog uncurls his hand, and the pad touches the stone's edge with a low sigh. The western route passes through the raspberry canes. Here the air smells faintly of sugar and iron. The leaves are rough on their backs and hold beads of water that roll when touched. Two carriers named Miro and Lute haul a narrow strip of bark that serves as a load sledge, its front bound with grass to form a nose. They speak in taps and rests, horn to horn, a language that is part touch and part weather sense. A beetle scout runs ahead, knocking dew from a thorn so the sledge will not catch. When the path rises, the carriers pause at the base and press more of their bodies to the bark, like adding hands to a shared task. A robin watches from a wire, head tilting. The robin is not a danger tonight. A bowl of cherries was overturned near the fence, and he has already eaten. He blinks once and turns his back, making the whole scene feel more private. Some letters contain more than words. One is a ring of grass woven loose, sent to a field mouse whose nest is cold. Another is a fish scale wrapped in paper, its iridescence meant to cheer a friend recovering from a winter scrape. There are tokens like smooth seeds for counting days, and a drop of honey stopped with a petal, sealed with a pressed thumb. The carriers treat each as if it were water in a cup. They keep them level when the path dips, and they arrange them so that the heavier items sit low on the sledge's floor. At crossings they rest and check for leaks of scent or stain. Nothing slips, because everything is watched. The road itself seems to notice. A blade of grass bends aside at the last moment, and a root rises a little less sharply than it could have. The mail house behind the greenhouse pane is the archive of the network. Shelves are formed from stacked tiles, and each tile holds bundles sealed with knots. The air carries a soft warmth baked into it during the day. On the far wall, a map shows the garden as a set of simple shapes. The bucket, the hose loop, the bird bath, the laurel, the patch of oregano. Pins made from thorns mark special delivery points. In a matchbox drawer labelled with a charcoal line, there are old stamps collected for their colours: pomegranate red, violet from grape skins, a faded ochre made long ago from a crushed lichen. A tortoise sometimes sleeps beneath the lowest shelf, and his slow breath is the room's metronome. He does not move much. He only huns once in his mind when someone posts a letter marked "Keep through winter." Tonight, a special dispatch lies waiting in a shell-white tray. The envelope is cut from the inner layer of a paper bag, softened by months in soil. It is stitched on one side with grass and sealed with pine resin polished smooth. The address is a neat drawing of a window with 6 panes, a sill that slopes, and a small potted violet on the left. It belongs to an upstairs room at the far end of the fence. The letter carries a hint of lavender pressed into its corner. It must arrive before dawn. Pika assigns the route to an older carrier named Rowan, whose shell holds thin rings, like years in a trunk. Rowan studies the sketch, nods once, and loops the satchel over the strongest part of his curve. Rowan leaves by the brick path where shadows of the fence make a ladder on the ground. Each brick holds a shallow bowl of damp caught from the evening air, and Rowan drinks without stopping. Past the watering can, the smell of metal becomes faint. Past the rosemary, the smell changes to green and peppered. At the compost heap he pauses, while heat glows faintly above the mound, then slides along the rim, where warmth and cool meet like a border. The fence boards tower like a city wall. There is a gap where a board has cracked. Through it, the alley shows a ribbon of asphalt and a bottle cap that has settled into dust. Rowan studies the knothole map, searching for the one with a snag at its right edge. He finds it and climbs the grain's shallow grooves like stairs. On the far side, a window faces the alley. The sill bears the outline of the potted violet from the drawing. The pot is chipped in one place, just as drawn. Rowan rests on the sill's edge and breathes through his body, feeling the long weight of the letter. Inside the window, a curtain hangs with tiny pills of lint caught along the hem. A slow draught leaks along the glass and cools his shell. He waits for the draught to settle, then sets the envelope upright against the frame, its seal toward the room. He presses the postmark pebble he carries wrapped in moss, leaving a circle of blackberry purple in the corner. From inside, a sleeping figure turns once and returns to stillness. The violet tilts its leaves toward the letter, as if listening. The return route follows the fence top, where lichens make pale continents. The sky has lowered a little, and stars rest in puddles caught in nailheads. A moth strikes the glass, once, twice, then drifts away with no plan. Rowan climbs down the far side to avoid a stretch of gravel that holds air pockets and quick dries his trail. He passes a knot of wood where someone once carved the outline of a heart, now lifted slightly by years of rain. From a roof edge above, water taps through a bent gutter in an even drip that makes a clean interval for pacing. Rowan times his moves to the drip without deciding to do so. In the alley, a cat walks like a shadow and pauses, nose lifting. The cat chooses an old newspaper as a bed, turns twice, and is no more a problem than a stone. While Rowan travels, the east branch of the post is busy with small errands that keep the network whole. A squirrel drops a chestnut into the exchange basket near the laurel, payment for a bundle of thread for lining. 2 slugs deliver a roll of lettuce journal pages back to the archive after copying a recipe for a winter tonic made from nettles. Over at the bird bath, a wren brings a found ring, and asks if the lost and found box can hold it. The clerk, Dado, sets the ring in a cotton bowl and ties a note, found by the basin, to it. A hedgehog brings a list rolled tight as a bead, scratched with the simplest marks. 1 scratch for mushrooms, 2 for beetles, 3 for an old quilt of dried grass that can be lent on cold nights. The list has no address. It is posted to whoever has surplus. The network knows how to route such things. When storms come, there is a different rhythm. Rain drums on the greenhouse, and the drums echo through the tiles. The post does not stop. It shifts. Ferries run more often. Carriers seek cover between moves and take routes that keep them on the uphill side of puddles, where water pulls less strongly. Dado updates the slate with thicker arrows and draws little pools to remind new carriers of hidden dips that disappear under lathered water. A leaf roof is stretched between 2 stakes to cover the sorting table. The glowworm is tucked under a glass and glows through a bit of cloth, so the light does not lure flying neighbours into trouble. Mail marked not urgent waits under a brick until the downpour thins. Mail marked warm goes out first. Notes wrapped around jars with hot stones inside that must be delivered before the stones cool. The stamp room is a favourite place for visitors. Children from the mouse family come to sniff the berryings and choose colours for pretend letters they will send to a hole 2 yards away. A set of potato stamps, cut into shapes, rests in a dish. A circle for received, a crescent for replied, a tiny square for forwarded to the hollow. When a real stamp is pressed, there is a satisfying give and then a quiet lift. Sometimes a letter gets 2 stamps by accident, and no one minds. The extra mark looks like a decoration. Piker teaches the mice to keep fingers off the stamp face, so the image stays clear. And the mice try very hard not to smudge. After the lesson, each gets a card stamped with an acorn cap and a nettle leaf. The cards are kept in a drawer labelled Practice. And every so often, a mouse finds his own old work there and smiles in a way only mice do. By midnight, the roots have thinned into a trickle. The central basket now holds only a few threads, a cork, and a pale seed that arrived without address and will be planted in the morning. The toad leaves his post with a short hop to the fern's shadow. Miro and Lute return with an empty sledge and set it on its side to dry. They report a fallen twig near the raspberry bend, and Dado notes it on the slate with a small bar. He will send a worker crew with a paper-thin saw made from a scallop shell. Rowan returns too, his shell damp and streaked with fine dust from the fence. He nods to Piker and rests in a bottle cap half filled with cool water. A beetle leans its side gently against his shell, in a greeting that is also a thanks. There are small stories that live only as long as one delivery. A letter carried at dusk to a spider, whose web was torn by a careless wind. Inside, a single hair from a dog's brush, perfect for a guy line. A message left on the gatepost for the fox that patrols at dawn. A simple coil of thyme stems to rub against, to carry the garden scent further along the hedge. A folded square, placed in a lark's favoured footprint at the field's edge. 3 grass seeds, chosen because the lark dropped them and seemed to wish them found. None of these are recorded in the archive because they do not need to be. They arise from knowing who passes where and what helps whom. They are part of what keeps the path smooth and the pauses gentle. On clear nights at the end of the week, the post holds a circle at the time office. The carriers arrange shells in a ring on the soil, each shell a seat. The beetle pulls the thimble sled into the center and climbs onto it as if into a chair, which makes the young mice laugh once before falling quiet again. Pika reads the root notes out loud, her voice a soft scrape that feels like a broom levelling sand. Dado lists the repairs done and the ones to do, and a slug raises a feeler to volunteer for a dawn shift when the dew is heavy. A frog, polite but brief, announces the ferry schedule for the next cold snap. There is no applause, only a shared stillness that means everything is understood. Then the circle breaks and the tools are put away. The human house sleeps while this work continues. In the kitchen, a fruit bowl holds a lemon and 2 apples, and the air near it feels a fraction warmer. On the porch, a broom leans with its straw, rough as stubble, and a leaf has lodged in the bristles and will stay there until morning. A shoe by the mat is damp on the toe and drying on the heel. Near the back door, a draught slips under and cools the threshold. The garden drinks what is left of the day's heat and gives it back in small puffs. If a passer-by were to kneel and press an ear to the time, they might hear the light scrape of a pencil, the soft push of a shell on stone, the click of a tiny bell seed tapped once to mark a moment. Before dawn, a few last deliveries find their places. A string of grass is looped around a cracked terracotta pot to hold its piece in place until a hand can mend it. A note for the robin is tucked into the hedge. The edges chewed just enough to let the scent through. A reminder that cherries will drop again next week, and there will be enough for everyone. A narrow strip is slid under the handle of the watering can. It bears a map to where a lost spoon waits under clother. The pond fairies make one last trip from reed to stone, and the frog lets the barge drift a little before guiding it in, just for the pleasure of easy water. A glowworm dims to a thin ember, and then to nothing, leaving the paper stack silver in the first light. The tortoise wakes, lifts his head like a hinge, and nods at no one in particular. Morning folds over the garden like a clean sheet. The central basket is empty and drying, its weave darkening where drops still cling. The stamp pebble lies on its cloth and will be washed in a cup of rainwater when the first hand finds it. The slate is half wiped, new roots not yet drawn. Pika tucks the mint sprig under the strap on her shell and slides into the shade of the fern. Dado snaps his journal closed and hides the pencil stub under the cork desk. Miro and Lute pull the sledge into the archive room, where the tiles still hold a little warmth. Rowan rests under the lowest shelf, near the tortoise. The sound of slow breath a lullaby that belongs to this place. Later today, someone will find a letter on a windowsill and lift it with surprised fingers. The seal will break with a soft crack, and the narrow paper will open with a dry leaf sound. The words may be only a few lines, maybe a drawing, maybe only a pressed flower that keeps no secret except that it was sent. The sender will not stand nearby to see the face that opens. The network never asks for that. It knows the weight of paper and the shape of roots, and it trusts the small shift that happens when something arrives where it was meant to go. When night comes again, the bell seed will ring once more, and the snail carriers will take their places, without complaint or hurry. Their trails will silver the paths, thin and true, pointing from the basket to the doors that wait. And so when you listen tonight, through a window cracked, through a screen, through the soft noise of a room, you might catch a small scrape that hardly counts as sound. You might smell the faint mix of mint and damp earth, as if a leaf were being folded. The network is not fast, but it is certain. It is not loud, but it is everywhere. The ground is kind. Let us move when the air cools, when the stones release their stored day, when frogs lift their eyes to check the bank. The garden keeps the roots, even when no one walks them. The snail post will be there the next night, and the next. Patient little creatures with shelled satchels, happy to carry what needs to move from one quiet place to another.